to the best of my. So before our session, the comprehension of an unseen poem. So you all know it very well that this reading comprehension of a poem is very difficult. The students, especially in 10th class, they feel it difficult during the 9th and 10th classes. So here I would like to throw a light on how to tackle with the reading comprehension of an unseen poem. Okay? So here, actually, reading a poem is intended for the appreciation and enjoyment. Okay? So poetry is after all based on the imagination, creativity, and it is to be enjoyed by the readers, and it is to be appreciated by the readers of that particular poem. But here, when it comes to examinations, here the main target is, of course, not the appreciation of the poem. Here, the readers are expected to score good marks in the examination. So this session is going to be about how to tackle with the unseen poem in the examinations under the section reading comprehension. Okay? So let us discuss that in detail. So as you all know that in the examinations, usually children are given an unseen poem in paper 2 of 9th and 10th classes, and usually the poem comes from various themes, and we do not expect the theme of that particular poem. And let us see what to read in that unseen comprehension or comprehension of a poem, and how to deal with. Now it's a question. It's a question that what storms every brain when it comes to deal with the unseen. What are the things that we need to focus on while reading a poem? Okay? What are the core areas that we need to pay attention while reading a poem? So can I seek or can I expect some replies from you? What are the things that we need to focus on? Yeah, let us see. First of all, before if we want to answer the questions related to an unseen poem, first of all, we should make the students familiarize with the things that they need to focus on. So the first thing that they need to focus on is the identifying the title hints of the poem. Okay? The first thing that we should aware or we should make the students familiarize with the significance of the title. So the title of a poem gives a lot of hints to the students to understand the theme of the poem or to understand the gist of the poem. So that is the first basic thing we should encourage the students to focus on the title and trying to get the summary or the gist or the topic of the poem. For example, look at one title that has been given here. Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. It's a poem written by the American poet Robert Frost. So first of all, students should be encouraged to analyze and understand the title of the poem. Okay, if you look at the title of the poem, so here the title refers to one particular incident. So that incident is Stopping by Woods. Stopping by Woods is the title of that particular poem, and that is the incident. It refers to the incident, and the title sounds like a little of a painting. I request the host to mute the participant.
Sir, please unmute all, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, sir, I unmuted. Sidwa, sir, please mute yourself and.
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing is focusing on the title and trying to get some hints from the title about the poem. If you look at this particular title, this title refers to an incident. That incident is Stopping by Woods. And this title sounds like a little title of a painting. Okay, for example, here we can imagine Stopping by Woods on a snowy evening. It's like just like a painting, and it creates an image in the minds of the readers. Okay, they can imagine what the poem is going to be about, and by making use of the title, the readers will guess the theme of the poem, that they come to a conclusion that the poem might be about nature. So these are the inputs that this title is giving for the reader. So the best thing is to encourage the students to understand the title of the poem because it provides them with lots of information. Okay, so that is the first thing we need to focus on. And second one is that we should encourage the students to identify the narrator or poet, and they should be able to identify the characters in the poem, and they should be also able to identify the setting of the poem, because most of the times questions may be asked on these three areas: who is the narrator of the poem, or the speaker of the poem is. Otherwise they will also ask whom is the poet addressing to, who are the main characters in the poem. So in this manner, the students are what suggested to identify the narrator in the poem, and what are the main characters in the poem, and what is the setting of the poem, that is the time and location of the poem. So these three things are to be identified by the students. For example, if you look at the same poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, here the setting is, it is obvious from the title. Okay, it is clear from the title that the setting is woods on a snowy evening. And narrator, if you read the poem, you will be able to identify that the narrator is a solitary rider admiring the beauty of nature. Okay, so the theme here in the poem is admiring the beauty of nature. So this is the second thing that the students need to do when they deal with the poem. Okay, so first one is identifying the title and trying to get some hints about the theme of the poem. Second one is identifying the narrator, identifying the characters, identifying the setting of the poem. Okay, these two things are very important. These two are the basic inputs, okay, that give the meaning of the poem. And the other things that we need to focus on are the content of the poem. This is an important thing. So what is the poet trying to convey from that poem? That should be understood by the students. Content of the poem, and even the main idea or the subordinate ideas that the poet is trying to convey. So students are suggested to identify the main idea of the poem. Usually this main idea can be found in the first stanza or in the last stanza. So whenever they come across a question like what is the main idea of the poem, what is the central theme of the poem, they should be encouraged to refer to the first stanza or the last stanza, because these two stanzas provide the students with the central theme or the main idea, and the sub ideas of the poem can be found in the remaining stanzas. Okay, so this is the second important element that the students should focus on. And even the mood and atmosphere of the poem. Usually the attitude of the poet or the attitude of the poem is also be given. So that's why we also need to encourage the students to identify the mood of the poem or the atmosphere of the poem. And some other times in the examinations, the meaning of important words or the meaning of important phrases is also being given. That's why whenever they read the poem, they should be able to identify the meaning of the poem, predict the meaning of the word with the help of the context. Okay, so that is the next element that we should focus on while solving a poem. Okay, identifying the important words and phrases and trying to predict their meaning. That is also essential. And here in some examinations, even the structure of the poem is also been asked. Okay, like the stanza form or number of stanzas in the poem, and punctuation is also very important in order to understand its main. And the next one is figures of speech used in the poem. Okay, usually poetry makes use of figurative language. Okay, so students are also expected to identify the figures of speech that are being employed in that particular poem. And finally, the response of the students towards the poem, that is also very important. So that is the last one, response to the poem. So these are the main things that the students should be encouraged to focus on while reading the poem. Not only the students, even we also, when we read a poem, we are suggested to go through these important things, and this is about the things that we need to focus on when we read a poem. Okay. Now let us see what kind of questions are being asked on this reading comprehension. So what are the commonly asked questions related to this particular poem? Let us see them. Usually, factual questions are asked when it comes to poetry. Usually, factual questions are discouraged when it comes to the prose passages. But in prose, in poetry, factual questions are asked. Okay, you know it very well that factual questions are based on the facts given in the poem. Okay, so what kind of factual questions are asked in the poem? They ask you, the speaker of the poem is, or according to the poet, what is, and any other questions dealing with the specific ideas mentioned in the poem. So students feel it very comfortable and easy while solving this kind of questions. That is the factual questions. At least one or two factual questions are given in the poem, and it is not at all a difficult thing for the students to attempt to this type of questions. That is the first kind of question, factual question. And the second question is the questions on main idea. Okay. So in these type of questions, the students are expected to tell the main idea or the central theme of the poem. The students are expected to identify the main idea or the central theme of the poem. So the questions include the poem is about, or the main idea that the poet is trying to convey is. Such kind of questions are usually asked, and this is an important thing, main idea. Usually every poem, almost all the poems ask a question on the central idea or central theme or summary or main idea. This is a commonly asked question, second one. And the third one is the questions on inferences. The questions on inferences are also asked. And these questions on inferences are on entire passage. The students are expected to infer what is not directly stated. Okay. So students have to make indirect conclusions of the passage. Okay. So inference is nothing but what is not clearly stated in the poem. Okay. So they are not directly stated in the poem. For example, it can be inferred from the poem that, or the poem uses so and so word to imply that, or what can be inferred when the poet states some idea. Okay, the sentence so and so implies that. So these are all the inferential questions, and this is also, these kinds of questions are also asked in the poetry. So this is the third important question when it comes to answering the poems. Okay, and let us go to another thing, that is one common question is on the figures of speech. Okay, like identifying the figures of speech that are used in the poem. It is also very usual question. One such question is expected from this idea, that is on the figures of speech. Okay, so these are the main four kinds of questions that we always come across while answering the questions in unseen poem. So the students are expected to know the central idea. Second one is infer the meaning which is not directly stated. And the third one is about the figurative language, that is the figures of speech. And the fourth one is factual questions, like the setting of the poem, like the time and location. Okay, these are the commonly asked questions in an unseen poem. Okay, now let's also look at one example. Let's take one example related to this unseen poem, and let's try to understand it. So here is a poem written by Kannada poet Basavanna, and it was translated into English by the great Indian poet A.K. Ramanujan. Okay, so this is a small poem. I have chosen this just to understand the nature of questions and how to approach that. Uh, the rich will make temples for Shiva. What shall I, a poor man, do? My legs are pillars, the body the shrine, the head a cupola of gold. Listen, O Lord of the meeting rivers. Things standing shall fall, but the moving ever shall stay. So here I have also given the glossary. Okay, cupola is nothing but a small rounded dome. Things standing suggests that the solid, unmoving temple. Okay, and the moving means human beings. So these are the words that the students can take the help of the glossary. Okay. Now, can anyone talk about this poem? Two or three sentences about the poem. What the poet is trying to convey in this? Any one of you, please. Unmute. Say two or three sentences about the poem. Okay.
Please respond, sir. Anyone? Unmute yourself and respond.
Okay. No problem. I don't want to wait for much time. So this is a poem, a very simple and small poem, originally written in Kannada by Basavanna, but later translated into English by A.K. Ramanujan. And now let us see what kind of questions can be framed from this poem. Based on this poem, let us see what are the commonly framed questions. Okay. So the first question is the lines, the rich will make temples for Shiva implies that. So this is a inferential questions because this is not clearly stated in the poem. It's not directly stated in the poem. The students have to infer the underlining. Okay. So here the rich want to please the Lord. They can afford to build temples. They believe that this is how they can serve God. They believe that the temple is the only place to feel the presence of God. So what is the appropriate answer to this question? At least try to respond using the chat box. Yeah, very nice to see the responses here in the chat box. What is the response to this first question? So here they want to please the Lord. Here everyone wants to please the Lord. This is not clearly stated. And they can afford to build the temples. But the main theme of the poem is not this. And the ambiguity lies between the option C and D. Okay, they believe that this is how they can serve God. They believe that the temple is the only place to feel the presence of God. So D is the answer. So the rich people think that a temple is the only place to feel the presence of God. Okay? So that is the appropriate answer if you look at this particular poem. And this is question 1. And let us see the second one. To the line, what shall I, a poor man, do? The poet wants to express his dash. What does the poet want to express through this poem? So first one is anger, second one humility, anguish, and pride. What does he want to convey? So again, this question is also on inference. The students have to infer, and they need to infer the mood of the poet and the attitude of the poet. Okay. So I have already told you that the students should understand the mood of the poem and attitude of the poem. So this question is on the mood. Okay. What mood does this indicate about the poem? So anger, humility, anguish, and pride. So I think you are pretty well about the answer. Okay. So that is nothing but he wants to convey his extreme pain, that is anguish. Okay. So anguish is the thing that he's trying to convey from this poem. So his anguish Okay, that is the answer for this question. So this question is about the mood of the poem or the attitude of the poem. The first question is about okay. The first question is about that inference. Okay. The poet in the poem says, "My legs are pillars, the body the shrine, etc." So what is the figure of speech used in these two expressions? One is metaphor, second one is personification, third one is simile, and the fourth one is alliteration. So these are the four questions, four options that we have. So what is the figure of speech used by the poet here? So obviously the answer is A, because here the poet actually, if he is comparing his legs to the pillars and he is comparing the body to the shrine. But in this comparison, the words like or as is not used. Okay, so this is an implied simile, we can say implied comparison. That implied simile or implied comparison is nothing but a metaphor. Okay, so here this is the third question. First question is on inference, second question is on mood and attitude of the poem, and the third question is on the figures of speech. The next answer the following questions in one or two sentences. The fourth question is, what is the central idea of the poem? Can anyone answer orally? What is the central idea that the poet is trying to convey?
The poor man anguishing his feelings towards God Shiva.
So he's showing his anguish towards Lord Shiva, or anguish towards the rich who are serving the god?
Yeah.
Okay. Can anyone respond to this question, fourth question? Anyone of you? Okay. So the next question. So here the fourth question is the central idea. Okay. And fifth question is, so a poem can be interpreted in many ways. The poem can be interpreted in many ways. That depends on the interpretation skills of the reader. The poet might have said that, written that poem from his point of view, but the readers can interpret that same poem in different ways. So there will be multiple responses to the questions in poetry. That depends on the interpretation. That's why I have expected different answers from you, but due to lack of time, we are unable to do that. So here, according to the poet, what does "things standing shall fall" suggest? So this is a factual question. Okay, you can find the answer to this question in this poem, and even that glossary also helps the student in about finding the answer to this question. And the sixth one is also a factual question. What is a temple compared to in the poem? Can anyone respond to this last question, sixth question? Okay, the human body. So human body is being compared to the temple here. So this is the topic, reading comprehension of an unseen poem, and here the students are what students should be encouraged to lot. If the students, if they want to get a good score in this part, that is reading comprehension of unseen poem, first of all we should sensitize them on the things that we need to focus on while reading. If they are able to identify the core elements of the poem, it will be easier for them to answer the question. That is the first challenging thing, identifying the important elements that we have discussed so far. Okay, like the title, like the mood and attitude, the central idea or the sub ideas. Okay, and even the figurative language used in that one, structure of the poem. Okay, inferring what is not directly stated. So all these things are the important areas that the students should focus on while reading. That is the first thing we should encourage in the students. And after that, the second important thing is that they should be given plenty of practice in unseen poems. So these questions, if we provide them with a sufficient practice related to these unseen questions, it boosts their confidence, and they will be exposed to the different techniques that are used in the poem. So that is the importance of practice. Okay, so make the students practice a lot of poems with the questions. Okay, there are two benefits with this practice. One is it boosts the confidence of the students, and they feel that they can answer the question. That is the main thing. And second one, they will be exposed to the interpretation of the poem. Okay, so this is the thing that we need to suggest for the students. And if we make the students study a poem in this manner, definitely they will be able to score good marks in the examination, and they will be able to it. Okay, so that's about the topic reading comprehension of an unseen poem. And the next topic that I would like to talk about is figures of speech. Now, can I have some questions if you have any regarding this? If you have any queries related to this poem, just you ask me. Okay, then let us go to the second segment of this session, that is figures of speech. So there are many figures of speech, but I would like to focus on at least 10 important figures of speech. Okay, so let us see first what are figures of speech, and let us also discuss the significance and use of the figures of speech. Later, let us discuss that one. You just remember that whenever you produce a language orally or in written form, usually we make use of two kinds of languages. One is a literal language, and the second one is a figurative language. So these are the two kinds of language we often employ when we speak or when we write. Okay, now let us see what is this literal language and what is this figurative language. The actual dictionary meaning of a word, if you use the words with their ordinary meaning, that language becomes a literal language. Okay, and figurative language is somewhat different than the literal language. This language goes beyond the normal meaning of the words. Okay, if the words or expressions have some special meaning, we can say that is a figurative language. And if you use this figurative language, your language looks fresh, and it looks somewhat majestic. Okay, so that's the difference between literal language and figurative language. And figurative language often consists of different figures of speech. If your language has figures of speech, then we can say that it is a figurative language. Okay, so what are the figures of speech? So figures of speech is an expression that uses words to mean something different from their ordinary meaning. If the words or the expressions have different meaning than the ordinary meaning, we can say that it is a figure of speech. These are the rhetorical devices. Rhetorical devices used by the poets for special effect. Okay, now let us see what is the examples. For example, you see, literally we can say, I have told you many times. I have told you many times is a literal language. The sentence is very ordinary. It does not have any intensity. Okay, but the same sentence can be explained, can be told in figurative language, saying that I have told you a million times. So here, using the expression a million times, okay, it gives intensity to your expression. It makes your sentence interesting. Okay, so this is a figurative language. Here, a figure of speech has been used in the expression a million times. So that language becomes rich and elegant. Okay, look at the second one. The pen is mightier than the sword. Okay, here the pen represents, okay, what the literate people, okay, or the scholars or the writings, whereas the sword represents the military power. Okay, So actually here the sentence is wisdom is mightier than military power. But instead of saying that, the poet has used figurative language. The pen is mightier than the sword. Okay. So here also a figure of speech has been used, and it is very interesting to read. Okay. The road we had come by looked like a giant motionless road. Here this expression is used to compare the shape of the road in an interesting manner. So if we use these kinds of expression in poetry or in prose, that language is known as a figurative language. This is the introduction to the figures of speech. Then what is the significance of figures of speech? What are the benefits of figures of speech? Okay. For better understanding of language, one has to use the figures of speech. Okay. And second one is for giving freshness to your expression. If you use figures of speech, the expression becomes very fresh and interesting. And if you want to give clarity when you speak or when you write, okay, the figure of speech does that. That is, in order to give the clarity, we can use the figure of speech. Okay, you need not use lengthy sentences, lengthy expressions if you use the figure of speech. So it brings preciseness. It also brings humor to your language. Okay, and even if you want to give musical effect to your language, you can make use of the figures of speech. It brings musical effect to your language, whether it is a written discourse or whether it be oral discourse, whatever it may be, it gives musical effect. And if you want to convey your emotions in an effective manner, use figures of speech. And if you want to emphasize an idea also, figures of speech are highly helpful. These are the uses of the figures of speech, and this is about the significance of figures of speech. Okay, now let us see what are the different types of figures of speech. Okay, first let us see the classification, and then let us take a few figures of speech and let us have their what meaning. The first classification of figures of speech is based on the resemblance. Okay, based on resemblance, there are 8 figures of speech. Okay, first one is simile, metaphor, personification, pathetic fallacy, apostrophe, imagery, euphemism, allegory. So these 8 figures of speech are based on the comparison or resemblance. This is the first type of figures of speech. Second one is based on the repetition. Figures of speech based on the repetition. Many times we repeat words, we repeat expressions, we repeat sentences, even stanzas are also repeated. So based on the repetition of the words or sentences, there are 5 figures of speech. First one is alliteration, second one is assonance, consonance, repetition, as well as anaphora. These are the 5 figures of speech based on the repetition of a word or the repetition of an expression. And the next classification is based on construction of a poem or the structure of a poem. They are anticlimax, climax, colloquialism, rhetorical question, transfer epithet, exclamation, and interrogation. These are the figures of speech based on the construction or structure of a poem. For example, if you take the poem A Nation's Strength, written by R.W. Emerson, he says, what makes a nation great and strong? What makes a nation great and strong? This is the question that he often asks in that poem. So here, there is no one else to answer that question. He himself answers the question. He asks the question and he also gives the response to that. That kind of question is asked, known as the rhetorical questions. So rhetorical questions are also a figure of speech. Okay, so these are the figures of speech based on the construction of a poem. And based on contrast, if you look at the figures of speech based on contrast, there are 5 figures of speech like antithesis, paradox, epigram, oxymoron, and pun. These are the 5 figures of speech that have differences in the meaning. They talk about the differences, contrast. Okay. Based on the association, okay, it means association means one thing resembles the other thing. So based on association, there are 3 figures of speech like metonymy, symbol, and synecdoche. So these are the 3 figures of speech based on the, and the last one is based on moral and criticism. Based on moral and criticism, there are 3 figures of speech. One is fable, second one is parable, and the third one is irony. These are the 3 figures of speech based on the moral and criticism. Okay, so this is the classification of the figures of speech. Now we are going to take a few examples with their meaning. So if time permits, I'll be talking about at least 10 to 15 figures of speech that are frequently used in our textbooks or in the teaching learning process. Okay, so in our teaching context, most of us teach for the students of 10th class. So my target, based on the context that we are teaching in, I'm going to talk about 10 to 15 figures of speech depending on the availability of time. So the first figure of speech is a simile. Okay, simile is used to compare. Look at the example which is displayed on the slide. Our soldiers are as brave as a lion. Okay, so here 2 different or dissimilar things are compared. 2 dissimilar things are compared. Okay, one is soldiers and the second one is a lion. It means one is a human being, but another one is an animal, that is lion. So 2 dissimilar objects are compared using the word as. Using the word as. Why are they being compared? Because they have one common quality. That common quality is bravery. Okay, that common quality is bravery. So we call it a simile. Look at the second one. She is like an angel. She is like an angel. Here, a human being is compared to an angel. Okay, human being is different, angel is different. 2 different objects are compared by using the word like. Okay, the common quality between them is beauty. So that's why we also call it a simile. This is the introduction to the simile. So simile is nothing but comparing 2 dissimilar objects. Comparing 2 dissimilar objects using the words as or like. Okay, now let us see. A simile is an explicit comparison. Explicit in the sense it is visible outward. Okay, you can see it directly, you can identify it directly. So it is an explicit comparison between 2 essentially unlike things, 2 dissimilar things. Okay, so 2 dissimilar objects are compared using the words like, as, or so. If you compare 2 dissimilar objects using the words like, as, so, we call it a simile. This is the introduction to the first figure of speech, simile. Let us look at a few examples. He had grown so weak that he looked frail as a child. Okay, so here his weakness is being compared to a child. So a human being, a grown-up, is compared to a child using the word as. So that's why we call it a simile. I think you may have identified, okay, what the lesson. Okay, and here look at the second example. Mrs. Jordan says in the lesson, the dear departed, they sneaked into your room like thieves in the night. So here they are compared to thieves. The members of the family are compared to the thieves using the word like. Okay, so such a comparison is also known as a simile. Okay, that is also known as a simile. That is the first figure of speech. Let us look at a few more examples. Bells for the feet of blue pigeons, frail as a dragonfly's wing. Okay, so this line is from the poem in the Bazaars of Hyderabad written by the great Indian poetess Sarojini Naidu. So the delicacy of the bells for the feet of the blue pigeon is compared to the delicacy of the dragonfly's wings. Two are different things, bells, dragonfly's wings. Both of them are different, two dissimilar objects, but the common quality of theirs is compared by using the word as, so we call it a simile. And last example, like a child at play, like impetuous youth, like just like mortal prime, like eternity. Okay, this is from the poem River, and here different stages of a river are compared to the different stages of a human being, and that comparison is made using the word like. So this is also called a simile. We call it a simile. This is about okay, the first figure of speech, simile. Okay, and now let's move to the second figure of speech, which is almost related to this figure of speech simile. Metaphor is the second figure of speech. Okay, so figure of speech metaphor is an implied comparison. Implied comparison means you have to infer that there is a comparison between two things. Okay, it cannot be seen outward. Okay, you have to infer that comparison. Okay, look at the example. The camel is the sheep of the desert. The camel is the sheep of the desert. Here, two dissimilar things. One is camel and second one is sheep. Okay, but there is an internal what implied comparison. Okay, here the words like, as are not used. Such a comparison is known as a metaphor. Okay, and life is a dream. Here also life is a different thing and dream is another different thing, but the common quality of theirs is compared without using like, as. So this is also known as a metaphor. This is the second figure of speech. Okay, so what is a metaphor? Metaphor is also a comparison of two dissimilar objects, but it is an implied comparison. It is an implied comparison. We do not use the words like, as, or so. Okay, so metaphor is an implied comparison between two unlikely things, and they have something important in common. We don't use the words like or as here. Okay, look at some examples here. Puru was a lion in the war. So here Puru was compared to a lion in the war. Puru is a human being and lion is an animal, but the common quality of theirs is compared without using the words like or as. So we call it a metaphor. And in the poem, in the drama, okay, as you like it, William Shakespeare has written one famous poem, which was spoken by a character Jacques, and that is all the world is a stage, and all the men and women merely players. So here, world is compared to a stage, and the people are compared to the players. But in this comparison, the words like or as is not at all used. So this is also known as a metaphor. Okay, so that is about the two important figures of speech, simile as well as metaphor. Okay, now I request any one of the participants to talk about the similarities in these two figures of speech and differences in these two figures of speech. What is the similarity? What is the difference? Any one of you, please come forward, unmute yourself, and talk about the similarities and differences.
Similarity means both have the same thing.
Sir, sir, please tell.
Yes, sir. Similarity means the both things have the same thing. Difference means they have different things.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Can anyone expect one? Can I expect one more response about this? What the similarities and differences? Two people have raised their hands. Okay. If possible, you just say about it. No, they are raising their hands but unable to unmute themselves. Okay.
Sir,
So
yeah, simile,
yeah, please.
sir, simile and metaphor compare between they both of them talk about the comparison. And when simile is used, the words like are used, but while it is a metaphor, like or as, the words like or as are not used.
Okay, sir. Right. So thank you so much for giving the explanation. So the similarity between these two figures of speech is nothing but both of them are used to compare two dissimilar objects. Okay, two different objects are compared by using simile and metaphor. That is the similarity. But the difference between these two figures of speech is that simile is an explicit comparison, metaphor is an implied comparison. And there we use the words like or as, but here in metaphor we don't use such words. That's the difference between these two things. And thank you for the two people for giving the explanation regarding this. Let's go to the third figure of speech, that is synecdoche. Okay, synecdoche is the third figure of speech. So here, look at one sentence example. India lost the final match. Remember, here it is not the country India that has lost the match. It is only the Indian team that has lost the match. Okay, so here the word India is giving the meaning of Indian team. Okay, it means whole is used to compare a part. Whole is used to represent a part. Okay, so that's why we call this figure of speech a synecdoche. Okay, so India is whole, Indian team is part. Whole is used to represent the part. Second example, he has many mouths to feed. Here mouth is a part. Okay, this part is representing the whole, that is the persons. Okay, so here mouths, that is a part, is used to represent the whole. That's why this is also known as a synecdoche. Okay, so simply synecdoche is nothing but, see here, part, whole is used to represent the part and part is used to represent the whole. Okay, so remember that is about the figure of speech synecdoche. Okay, so figure of speech in which a part is used to represent the whole or the whole is used to represent a part. For example, we say ABCs. It doesn't know even ABCs, we say. So here ABC part, it represents the whole, that is alphabet. Okay, we need 5 hands to finish the work. Here 5 hands means 5 people or 5 workers. So here also part is used to represent the whole. Okay, such a figure of speech is known as synecdoche. That is the synecdoche. Okay, and the fourth one is anaphora. The fourth figure of speech is anaphora. Let us see what an anaphora is. Just you look at the poem Where the Mind is Without Fear, written by Rabindranath Tagore. So you can read the poem which is displayed on the screen. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up. So this is a poem, and I have highlighted some words in the beginning of every line. Okay, and from this I am going to say that anaphora is used in this poem. The figure of speech anaphora is used in this poem. Can anyone tell me what is anaphora with the help of this slide?
Repeated lines, sir.
Repeated lines. Okay.
Good words, sir.
Can you make it elaborate, sir? Any one of you? Just to unmute your audio and just explain. Give a valid explanation for this. Okay, I'll tell you. If the poetic lines in a poem begin with the same word for many times, it is called an anaphora. If many lines in a poem begin with a single word or a single expression, we call it an anaphora. If you look at this poem, almost 7 lines have begun with the same word where. Many lines in the poem begin with the word where. So such a technique, such a figure of speech can be called the anaphora. Okay, so it is a deliberate repetition of a word or phrases at the beginning of several poetic lines. Okay, if many lines begin with the same word or same expression, it is called an anaphora, and this anaphora is used to emphasize an idea. If you want to emphasize one particular idea in your poem or in your prose, you use anaphora. Okay, and the next one is apostrophe. Okay, look at the poem of apostrophe. Let us see apostrophe. River, river, little river. Sir, can anyone tell me whom is the whom is the poet addressing here? Whom is the poet addressing? River, river, little river. The poet is addressing little river. Can that river respond to this poet? No, it will not respond. The river will not respond to that because a river is a lifeless object. A river is a lifeless object and it will never respond to the poet. Still, the poet is addressing it as if the river has life. Such a technique is known as apostrophe. Apostrophe is nothing but addressing the dead, addressing the absent, addressing the lifeless object. If you address these three, such figure of speech is known as an apostrophe. We often say, oh my God. We often say, oh my God. We are addressing God, but God will never address you. Okay, so saying, oh my God is also an apostrophe. Similar examples are there. River, river, swelling river. River, river, brimming river. River, river, headlong river. Okay, in all these lines, the poet is addressing a river, but the river will never respond again to the poet because it is a lifeless object. So such a technique is known as apostrophe. Okay, so apostrophe is a figure of speech in which the poet absent, inanimate, or dead is addressed if they have life. Okay, that is the figure of speech apostrophe. Okay, give me one. Give me the answer. O silent goblet, read from head to heel. The poet says, O silent goblet. Who is the poet and whom is he addressing to? Can you tell me the source of this poem? O silent goblet, read from head to heel. From which poem has this line been taken? From the poem The Earthen Goblet. So in this poem also, he is addressing the goblet. Okay, O silent goblets. Here, goblet will never respond. Such technique is also known as apostrophe. That is also known as apostrophe. That is the fifth figure of speech. The sixth figure of speech is the personification. Personification is the sixth figure of speech. Look at this example. Okay, the stars danced playfully in the moonlit sky. Usually, human beings dance, but the poet is saying that the stars danced. Okay, so here the poet is giving human qualities to the lifeless objects. Okay, if you give human qualities to lifeless objects, it is called personification. Okay, for example, opportunity was knocking at her door. Usually human beings knock at the door, but opportunity is abstract, lifeless. It will not knock at the door. Okay, so this is also called personification. Personification is nothing but giving human qualities to lifeless objects. Giving human qualities to lifeless objects. Okay, so that is the meaning of figure of speech personification. In the poem River, the poetess C.A. Boyles What did she do? She compared, okay, she personified the river as a human being. Okay, so the poem, the river is the perfect example for personification. There the river is personified as a human being. One more example, the leaves dance to the sound of the music. Okay, so here leaves will never dance, but the poet is personifying the leaves as a human being. So this is also an example for personification. Similar examples are, fate frowned on his endeavors, death lays his icy hand on kings. Okay, this is also one more example, and it's all about the personification. Okay, and the next one is alliteration. Okay, alliteration is a figure of speech. Look at this example. The clever cat climbed the kitchen wall carefully. The clever cat climbed the kitchen wall carefully. Second example, freedom from fear is real freedom. These two examples are the for perfect examples for alliteration. Can anyone tell me why do we call them alliteration? Any one of you, please respond. So in the chat box, someone has said that repetition of vowel sound or consonant sound at the beginning of words. Okay, so that's a nice definition. So repetition is nothing but alliteration is nothing but repeating a vowel sound or repeating a consonant sound at the beginning of successive words. If the same sound is repeated many times in a poem at the beginning, it is called alliteration. So here, clever, ka, and 5 times, 5 words have begun with the same sound, that is ka. So it is an alliteration. In the second one, fa sound is used before the beginning of 4 words. The sound fa is used before the beginning of 4 words. So this is also a perfect example for alliteration. Okay, let us see what's an alliteration. The use of words beginning with the same letter or sound is called alliteration. That is nothing but repetition of a sound before the beginning of words. Okay, example, faithful friends from flattering foe. Fa sound is repeated at the beginning of many words. Run and recover the real one. Ra sound is repeated. Breaking your back, blinding your eyes to the beckoning call of the future. Ba sound is repeated. The sound ba is repeated for many times in this poetic line. Such a technique is known as alliteration. Alliteration is nothing but repeating a sound, that may be a vowel sound or a consonant sound, for many times before the beginning. Okay, and another repetitive technique is consonants. Okay, consonants is nothing but repetition of a consonant sound in the middle or at the end of many words. If a consonant sound is repeated in the middle or at the end of successive words, it is called a consonance. For example, wristlets and anklets and ring. So here, lets, the words lets are used at the end. Take the book back. Consonant sound ka is used at the end of many words. Okay. And girdles of gold for dancers, scabards of gold for the king. Here also, the sound da is repeated in the middle or at the end. Okay, that is the assonance. Okay, I think I am quite clear to you all. Consonance is nothing but the repetition of a consonant sound in the middle or at the end of successive words. Okay, and assonance is the 9th one. It is very simple. Okay, a vowel sound is repeated in the middle or at the end. If a vowel sound is repeated in the middle or at the end of a words, it is called an assonance. For example, William Wordsworth's poem, Anecdote for Fathers, a line is there. My boy was by my side. My boy was by my side. Can anyone tell me why it is called an assonance? Why do we call it an assonance? Because the sound oi, is used many times in the middle or at the end. So my boy was by my side. I sound is repeated. The bride is shining bright in the new attire. Here also the sound I is used in the middle of many words. Okay, such a technique is called assonance. Now let us see the difference between the alliteration, assonance, and consonance. Alliteration means repetition of a vowel or consonant sound at the beginning. Okay, whereas consonance means repetition of a consonant sound in the middle or at the end. Assonance means repetition of a vowel sound in the middle or at the end. That is the difference between these three figures of speech: alliteration, consonance, and assonance. Okay, and 10th one is onomatopoeia. Okay, onomatopoeia is nothing but formation of a name or giving a name by imitating the natural sound. Okay, for example, cat, the what sound made by the cat is known as meow. So from that sound meow, we have generated or formed a new word, that is meow. So that meow is an example for onomatopoeia. Okay, so onomatopoeia is nothing but forming a name by imitating the sound. For example, the word quack. Okay, quack has it resembles the sound made by the duck. Okay, if you look at the poem The Duck and the Kangaroo, written by Edward Lear, so there the word quack is used. So that word quack has been formed with the help of the sound made by a duck. So this quack is an example for onomatopoeia. Okay, even in the poem Abandoned, the word shrieked. If you look at the line, unheard shrieks of babies' hysteria. Okay, so here the word shriek suggests the frightful cry of the child, and the word shrieked has been formed by listening to the sound. So that's why shrieked is also an example for onomatopoeia. It's called onomatopic word. Okay, even if you look at the same poem Abandoned, and there one expression is there, that is the screeching meow. Okay, so screeching meow is also an onomatopic word because it suggests the high pitched sound made by the cat. Okay, so this is about onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is nothing but forming a name by imitating the sound. Okay, and the next one is metonymy. Metonymy is another figure of speech. Okay, here metonymy means one item represents another item. One item represents the another item. For example, the bench represents the judges, the crown represents the king, the laurel for success, author is used for the book. So here all the things in yellow are representing different things associated with them. Such a technique is known as metonymy. For example, the pen is mightier than the sword. Here pen represents the words and sword represents the military power. Okay, so the words are used to represent two different things. So such a technique is known as metonymy. For example, if you listen to the word Lati, okay, automatically you come across the police. Okay, so if you talk about a piece of chalk, it represents the teachers. Okay, that technique is known as metonymy. And euphemism is another thing. Okay, euphemism is a simple thing. Just remember, if you use in the place of unpleasant things, if you use pleasant words, it is called euphemism. Unpleasant things are replaced by pleasant words. Okay, harsh expressions are replaced by mild words. Bad words are replaced by good words. Okay, so such a technique is used known as euphemism. For example, just you take one example. We are using washrooms. Okay, Usually the word associated with it is toilets. Okay, but the word toilets is somewhat harsh and it is somewhat unpleasant. So in the place of that unpleasant words toilet, we are using the word washrooms. Okay, nowadays washrooms, even washrooms also, the word has been replaced by restrooms. And even in some other countries, okay, restrooms or comfort stations. Comfort stations is also another word used for toilet. So the word toilet is somewhat harsh and unpleasant. In the place of that toilet, we are using restrooms, washrooms, comfort stations. Okay, so if you use these words, it is called euphemism. For example, the dear departed. The meaning of the word departed is dead. But if you use the word dead, it is somewhat inauspicious. It is somewhat unpleasant. So in the place of that unpleasant word, we are using departed. Okay, departed is an example for euphemism. Okay, so instead of the word toilets, we are using washrooms, okay, comfort stations or restrooms. That is also an example. For example, instead of saying urinating, okay, it is a unpleasant thing. So in place of that, we can simply say, relieved oneself. Okay, it is used for urinating. You are telling me a fairy tale, or you are telling me a story. Okay, the word story can be used for lying. Okay, so this technique is known as a euphemism, right? Rajamalu sir, how much time do I have still to talk?
Okay, sir. Sir, thank you. Question hour is left over. Mr. Madhu sir will ask you questions, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay, sure.
I invite Madhu sir.
Okay, okay. Last one, sir. Two things are there. Just give me 2 minutes of time.
Okay, okay, no problem.
So with that, we finish 15 figures of speech that are frequently used on our textbooks. So the 13th one is hyperbole. Hyperbole is nothing but the exaggeration, or we can say it overstatement. Okay. So in order to bring a comic effect, we often use hyperbole or exaggeration. For example, in the poem Home They Brought Her Warrior Dead by Alfred Lord Tennyson, he uses the word like summer tempest came her tears. So here her tears are being compared to a summer tempest. Okay, this is an exaggeration or this is an overstatement, and we call this figure of speech a hyperbole. And opposite to hyperbole is understatement or litotes. Okay, understatement or litotes is the opposite of hyperbole. Okay, if you intensify or if you increase the intensity, it is called hyperbole. If you decrease the intensity, it is called the understatement or litotes. Okay, and the last one is oxymoron. Oxymoron is nothing but placing opposite words next to each other. If you place opposite words next to each other, we call it oxymoron. For example, solemn birth is there. Okay, solemn is somewhat serious, birth is somewhat auspicious. But the meanings, opposite words are placed together, so we call it an oxymoron. Similarly, bittersweet, working vacation, open secret, act naturally, regularly irregular. All these are the examples for oxymoron where the opposite words are placed side by side in order to give an interesting effect to the poem or a prose lesson. Okay, so these are the frequently used figures of speech in our textbooks or in our teaching context. Okay, depending on the availability of time, we are expected to teach these figures of speech. Okay, just in future, it will be very helpful for the students to make their language elegant and rich. Okay, so this is all about from my side. Thank you so much. And if you have any queries, now you are free to ask.
Okay, sir. Now I invite Mr. Madhu sir, illustrating ZPH Sindranagar. Please, sir, respond.
Sir, thank you, sir. Sir, I am N. Madhu, Secretary of member of Executive Body, ELTA body member, sir. Srinivas sir, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It is a wonderful explanation. Your presentation is very clear. You have explained everything in detail. Actually, the chat box has filled with appraisals only, sir. There is no question to ask you. Everything is very clear. Actually, one question I have seen in the chat box that does alliteration starts with the first word only. After that question, already you have given the explanation, sir. I think from chat box, no query is there, sir. Once again, congratulations, sir. Your presentation is very clear and excellent, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so
Excuse me, Madhu, sir.
Sir, Yusuf, sir.
Sir, sir, Srinivas, sir.
Yes, sir.
Can we differentiate this hyperbole to simile, sir? Because in hyperbole
it's a good question, sir. Let me give a clarity on that. So here comparison, if the comparison is equal, we call it simile. For example, there is somewhat exaggeration in that comparison. Simply, we call it hyperbole, sir. Comparison is there in both the things. If the comparison is apt and appropriate, we call it a simile. Okay. If the comparison is not appropriate, if you exaggerate that comparison, we call it hyperbole. Right, sir?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Srinivas, sir, one request from us, sir. Some participants are requesting to send a PDF for us, sir. Just if you don't mind, please post the PDF in our group, sir.
Definitely, sir. I'll forward it to Rajamalu, sir, and he will forward to you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
He's in regular contact with me. Yes, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you, Srinivas, sir. You have given a wonderful presentation. Now I invite Mr. Srikanth, sir, Special English from JDPH Gudikandula, to give the vote of thanks. Is there? Hello? Srikanth. Yes, unmute yourself. Okay. Sir.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Right. Okay.
Thank you, sir. So,
yeah,
I am P. Srikanth, JDPHS Gudikandula, Toguda Mandal. Good afternoon, respected dignitaries, my dear friends. It gives me immense pleasure to propose vote of thanks on behalf of the Dynamic Union ELTA Siddipet. First of all, our warm thanks to our beloved DO, Mr. Ravikanta Rao Garu, for providing this wonderful opportunity and for his vision and commitment to work. I extend sincere thanks to our sectorial officer, Mr. Dr. Ramesh sir, for being our backbone in our endeavor and constant motivating and inspiring us. I want to express our gratitude to MUOs, complex HMs for your great job, sir. Now, I would like to extend special, sincere, warm gratitude to Mr. Dr. C.H. Srinivas, our presenter, state resource person, who received India's Super 30 Teachers Award in 2019. Sir, we are very, very happy with your crystal clear presentation on reading comprehension, on unseen poem and figures of speech. Sir, it is very critical to students as well as teachers, this part to teach. Now, it is became very easy. Thank you so much, sir. If possible, please send PDF file to us.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. Definitely.
Okay, sir. With the help of Srinivas, sir, I will provide that link. Sir will provide us. We will keep it in our group. Now over to Mr. Yusuf, sir. Thank you, Srikanth, sir.
My special thanks to ELTA President, Mr. Panja Rajamalu Garu, General Secretary, Mr. M. Yusuf Garu, and other workaholic persons in ELTA group, and all participants. Thank you, one and all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Srikanth, sir. Thank you, Srikanth, sir, for giving your vote of thanks on behalf of ELTA. Now over to Mr. Yusuf, sir. Please take the decision.
Yeah, sir. It is a time to wind up our session. Once again, we are thanking our guest lecturer, Srinivas sir. It is not the first time he is with us. In early before, I think it is in JPHS Indiranagar. He has shared the same things with us. We are very thankful to him. Yeah, it is a time to wind up, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Srinivas sir and Yusuf sir and all the English fraternity.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Bye.
Madhu sir, I am making you host so that you can.
Already
sir.
host
Okay.
Bhaskaran,
You
just
got-
you can close it.
Yeah.
Samagra Siksha.
Please take care. Either Madhu sir or Yusuf sir or Bhaskar sir, please take care of that one.
Okay,
Yeah,
Anna.
Bhaskar sir, now you are the host. You can wind up.
Is there Bhaskar sir? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let him take care. Close it.
Bhaskar sir, please respond.
Is there Bhaskar sir? I think host is Mr. Yusuf sir only. I saw.
No, sir. Now I make him Bhaskar sir as a host.
Anna, host మీరైనట్టు
Thank you.
సమగ్ర
But
శిక్ష వచ్చింది
whoever you may be, please you take care of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Personally, I am calling.
ఇక వైండ్ అప్ చేయండి అయిపోద్ది.
Sir, shall I end the close? Shall I close?
Once again, please take care of that.
Yes.
కంప్లీట్ అయింది. ఎండ్
Sir,
చేసుడే
shall I
ఎండ్ క్లిక్ చేయండి అంతే.
end the session, sir?
అన్న ఓకే.
Sir, this is Ajay Reddy, sir. Shall I end the session, sir?
సార్ ఓకే సార్. అజయ్ రెడ్డి సార్ ప్లీజ్ ఎండ్ దిస్.
Okay. End the
I am
session.
ending the session, sir. Thank you.
ఓకే సార్ థ్యాంక్ యూ. యూ కెన్ సార్.